Hi everybody, it's Win, and welcome to another video by the Entropy System. Doom Patrol debuted February 2019 on the now defunct DC streaming service. It was a superhero show at the height of superhero media, but this one was different. These superheroes were messy. They weren't necessarily good guys, they were just people put in unfortunate situations trying to do their best with what they could and maybe make the world a little bit better. The show featured a quirky cast of characters. You had Cliff Steele. He was a race car driver that almost died in a tragic accident, but his brain survived and was put into a robot, making him Robot Man. Rita Farr was the beautiful, blobby Elasta woman. She was a former movie star exposed to some weird toxic gas on set and now has the ability to turn her body into a totally gelatinous state. There's Larry Traynor, the bandage-wrapped negative man, a former Air Force pilot struck by some weird, otherworldly negative energy that manifested within him as the negative spirit. Now he shares his deformed radioactive body with this odd passenger. And then there's Jane Morris, the DID-having crazy Jane. She has DID!
Don't touch me! Oh, please touch me.
What a great start! When I was first asked to cover Doom Patrol, I did a little digging online to see what the DID community in general thought about Crazy Jane. And it turns out a lot of people like her. She's a favorite character for representation for a lot of people with the disorder. And I guess I can see why. Jane is very human in a way that we really don't get to see a lot with DID representation. And also, for the most part, the people around her are fantastic allies. We get to see Jane loved and appreciated and supported despite being messy and unpredictable, and that's kind of a beautiful thing. In my opinion, though, Jane herself is pretty terrible DID representation. Let's talk about it. And let's do it using a numbered list of reasons why I don't like her. Disclaimer, I did only watch season 1. It is possible that Jane gets better later on down the road, but each season has 15 episodes and each episode is an hour long, so if I tried to get through all of the seasons before making a video, it would probably be December by the time that happened. The alters are the quirk. Everybody in this cast has something that makes them a little weird, a little unconventional. They're not just like the Superman or the Flashes of the DC universes, those clean and tidy superheroes with clear-cut powers and only good intentions. Larry has this negative spirit inside of him that often wants to do things differently than him. They clash and that causes problems. He loses consciousness when the spirit leaves his body. Rita turns into this blobby being, especially when she's stressed, so it's not a power that she has control over, and it's a power she despises having. Cliff is a brain in a robot, which causes him to question his humanity and what a future in this metal form really looks like for him. Will he be able to connect to people, to have family and close friends? Jane has DID. Now, I know there's going to be somebody in the comment section that's like, actually, her quirk is that all of her personalities have different superpowers. But just having superpowers in the DC universe, even having multiple superpowers in the DC universe, is not weird or abnormal or quirky. Superman can fly and has laser vision and has impenetrable skin, and nobody's like, whoa, he has so many powers, that's so weird and unique. The quirk is that she has a disorder. Alters are the problem. In addition to their superpowers that they don't want to have, all the characters have this emotional journey that they're going on. They all have some kind of trauma that they carry with them that they're trying to overcome throughout the first season. Larry is struggling with the fact that his own radioactivity is responsible for killing his family. And he's also dealing with overcoming the trauma that homophobia has had on his entire adult life. His journey is about forgiving himself, battling his internalized homophobia, and learning to live authentically as himself and not what he thinks other people want him to be. Rita is struggling with the fact that she can no longer live in the spotlight. Her conventional beauty that she leaned so heavily on to get where she is in life is now a fleeting thing. giving way to this gelatinous creature at unexpected and stressful times. And now that she can no longer rely on her looks and her fame, she's realizing that because she had been cruel to so many people for so long, she's now alone. She has to learn what it truly means to be a part of a team, a part of a community, and learn how to put other people's needs before her own wants and comforts. Cliff is struggling with the loss of his family and the realization that he made choices through life that just made him untrustworthy and unreliable. He needs to learn to be someone who is honest and consistent, someone worth relying on. Jane has DID. Her whole identity, every aspect of her, is DID. Her backstory is the trauma that caused her DID and the hospitalization because of her DID. She has no struggle or joy or pain that is not exclusively from her DID. Literally, her only other defining personality trait is that she feels a fierce loyalty to the group's leader called the Chief. And now listen, having DID does affect just about every aspect of a person's life. It is an omnipresent thing, but we are more than our disorder. There are things about us that are not DID related. I went to school for geology. I travel a lot. I like tabletop RPGs and horror movies. None of that is because of my DID. None of that has anything to do with having a disorder. Jane doesn't get traits like this. She doesn't have an ongoing problem to overcome during the series. She doesn't even have an external problem. Jane is the problem. Jane is the problem. While everybody else has their own struggle that they're working on, James seems to be the struggle that other people have to work on. When she's portrayed in the show, the story seems to focus more on how others interact with her than how she is interacting or feeling or growing in any given moment.
I'm gonna kill myself!
Given her effect on the story as a whole, it really feels like she's mostly a plot device to help Cliff process the trauma of losing his daughter.
You think I see Jane as my daughter? Stop this, please.
She is his growth and redemption arc, rather than her own. The only time we really get to focus on Jane's emotions is when we get to see her inner world called the Underground. And honestly, that's not that good either. The Underground is a gimmick. The Underground is what Jane calls her inner world. It's laid out like a giant series of underground train stations, each room designated for a specific altar or memory that the altars can visit. The first time we hear about the Underground is when Cliff is listening to a recorded therapy session between Jane and the Chief. She says ominously,
The Underground is vast.
while Cliff uncovers a drawing that Jane did mapping the Underground and where everybody lives within. As he uncovers, he says, "Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit," like he's revealing some terrifying and awful secret, and then runs to where Jane is at full speed to try to stop her from hurting somebody. In one episode, after a particularly stressful event, Jane goes catatonic and nobody can wake her up. In an attempt to save her, the negative spirit uses his ambiguous powers to help Cliff go inside of her inner world so he can find her and help her resurface. As Cliff and the audience explores the Underground, we get to meet a bunch of different altars, almost all of which are just weird and spooky for no reason. There's a scarecrow that sits and stares at you. There's a nun with a chainsaw. There's a three-headed crone fortune teller. There's also a shrouded altar that exists to guard a hallway from people with penises passing through. But luckily, Cliff's a robot, so he's free to go. Why do they have a guard for external people? At one point, he goes into a zone that belongs to a now missing altar, and just this zone is littered with, like, corpses? Are these other altars? Are these just decoration for her room because we want to make it edgy and freaky? Just like, why? Why do we have these details? Why are we making this like a Halloween fucking haunted house. Listen, I'm no stranger to having alters that take on appearances in the inner world that are spooky. Our alter Karen used to be Monster and was just this big shadow beast that could shapeshift into like demons and giant snakes and stuff. That was her way of coping with the fear, was to be something scarier than what she was afraid of. But that's not what's going on in Jane's inner world. In Jane's inner world, everything is spooky and weird and uncomfortable, so we, the audience, can gawk at it and go, oh, that's so bizarre. I guess to be fair, it's not all bad. There are some things where I was like, yeah, that feels like an inner world detail. There's an alter named Driver 8 whose sole job is to help other alters front. They drive the train that travels the underground to help bring an alter from wherever they are to being in control of the body. And that feels very DID, kind of an internal helper gatekeeper role that a lot of systems have. I have a gatekeeper. I don't have like the internal train, but I do have an alter whose job is to control who is fronting, who can see what's going on in the outer world at any given moment. Like, that's a very common thing. There's also a jail area that the alter named Hammerhead controls. She puts other alters in jail when she feels that they are being dangerous or putting the system at risk. Having a place in the headspace specifically designed to suppress alters that the system is afraid of is not an uncommon thing. It is an unhealthy thing, but it is not an uncommon thing. Given the chaos that Jane's system finds themselves in often, because a handful of alters will just want to go off and do their own thing, it makes sense that they would have a place where they try to control that, symbolically appearing as a jail in the headspace. There's an area in her headspace where there is a oversized monster version of her father, the person that caused the trauma that made her have DID in the first place. And in this episode, she does confront this monster head on. And I was pleased that Jane was the one who confronted the dad monster, and it wasn't Cliff who stepped in and saved her. Like, he tried, but this was her monster to beat, and she got to be the one to beat it. I appreciated that detail. Other people can't overcome our trauma for us. We are the ones with that unfortunate responsibility. But getting back to the stuff I don't like, it is brought up a couple times in this episode how everything that everybody does is to protect Kay. Who's Kay, you ask? Oh, the original. The use of core theory. Core theory, for those of you who don't know, is the idea that within a DID system, there is the original, or the core. That there is the one real part of the system, and the other members of the system are solely designed to protect and defend the core. The other alters are more like overblown imaginary friends who will fade away or merge into the core, never to be thought of again. The most prominent theory now is called the theory of structural dissociation, and in a very simplified way, it just means that all parts of a system, every alter in the system, is real. It is all part of one unit that is just dissociated in very specific ways and cannot connect to each other like most brains that are one unit can. Like a pizza cut up into parts, or a kintsugi bowl with the boundaries of gold along the cracks. There is not one real part, one part more deserving to be recognized than the others. Everyone in the system is real. Everyone in the system needs validation and healing. Who fuses with who and who doesn't fuse at all? That's going to be different for each and every system in their own situations. There are still some therapists out there who just don't have up-to-date information or have willingly chose not to follow up-to-date information that still go hard into core theory. And in my opinion, I am not a medical professional, I am just a person who lives with this disorder, but in my opinion, that's dangerous. When you have parts of yourself that are hurting because of trauma, that are wrapped up in the trauma that you all experience together, that need to be able to heal and have their emotions be validated, and that is pushed to the side because they don't front as much as another part, that is a person actively repressing their own need for healing. With DID, you are simultaneously one person and many people at the same time. Every alter is you, and you are every alter. So when there's an alter that is traumatized and scared and needs healing and is maybe behaving in a way that is scary or destructive, repressing that alter is repressing your own need for healing. And as we know from knowledge about every aspect of life, repression is never a good thing. So when Jane is talking to a puppet Nazi and he offers to remove all the alters so that only the core can remain, I wanted to scream when he calls out Jane for not being the original.
Tell me, Jane, are you not the core persona inside your little menagerie?
Smoke! Smoke out my ears. It's perpetuating a damaging idea that keeps systems from healing and makes it harder for people with DID to build support systems from the people in their lives, because it's spreading this toxic idea to people who don't know any better. Oh, it's just a TV show. It's not that big of a deal. People know the difference between fiction and reality. But they don't, though. If you don't have any source telling you good information, and your only exposure to a topic is bad information, that's the information that you have. Fictional media changes how people perceive the world. That is an undeniable fact. And so when you are presenting dangerous and harmful information as fact, that is irresponsible at best. Jane has a lot of potential to be good DID representation in the hands of a writer who knows how to write DID. There are moments where Jane talks about, no, I don't control my alters. We are all autonomous beings.
It doesn't work that way. I don't control them, they don't control me.
And an alter saying, hey, just because I don't front very much doesn't mean I don't have my own dreams and my own feelings.
You think just because I'm one of the other personalities, I don't have feelings? Jane isn't the only one with hopes and dreams and emotions.
There's a lot of seedlings that could grow into very lovely conversations about DID because of Jane, but 99% of the time the show decides not to explore that and just make her something to gawk at. And the biggest shame comes in that they can write good DID representation. They did. Just not with Jane. Larry is better DID representation than Jane is. Larry and the negative spirit he shares his body with go through more of a DID-like journey, healing towards functional multiplicity, than Jane even comes close to doing, which blows my mind. Now, it's not a perfect one-to-one. The negative spirit didn't come into Larry's life until he was an adult. They also are two separate beings, not one being kind of separated into two. So I'm not trying to say that Larry Trainor does have DID within the confines of the show, but there are a lot of parallels between his journey and the journey of real-world systems that are handled with so much more humanity and compassion than Jane's story is. Starting out at the beginning, we see a host trying to fight for control over a system that he doesn't want to be there. He tries to leave town and go into the middle of nowhere where this weird unknown part of himself can't hurt people, but the negative spirit won't allow him to.
What do you want from me? I'm trying to protect people from you. Just let me go. Let me go!
They each fight for control of the body, and they each kind of lose. He then starts trying to communicate with the spirit by leaving notes, but they're kind of bossy and demanding, so the spirit retaliates and reacts very negatively to this attempt to be controlled. He badmouths the spirit, and the spirit has kind of a temper tantrum about it. These are all things that I feel like I can relate to a lot. How functionality becomes harder when you speak ill of your alters. How trying to control the others, to suppress them, to shut down these other parts of yourself really only ever backfires and makes the other parts of self, the other alters in the system, more reactive and less likely to work as a team. The negative spirit, despite feeling hurt by everything, tries to help Larry by forcing him to watch recordings of his own therapy sessions with the chief so that he can face things and not just repress them all the time. For a while, Larry refuses, but then he finally gives in and decides to watch a session and learns things about the negative spirit that he didn't know before. The chief tells Larry to talk to the spirit about how scared and vulnerable he feels when the spirit leaves his body and his body just collapse. It cannot function without the spirit present. He says that the spirit is more powerful and sensitive than Larry might think. Larry begins to change the way he interacts with the spirit. He speaks gently to it.
I get it. I don't want to go back either.
He asks it for help. He respects its abilities and his own shortcomings.
All right, pal. You want to be a hero? Go ahead.
The spirit starts becoming more of a helpful member of the team rather than a spontaneous hindrance, like when he helped Cliff get inside Jane's mind. Late in season 1, they both start making decisions that show that they are actively caring for one another. When they share a troubling vision or have to revisit a place that holds traumatic memories for both of them, Larry pauses and puts his hand on his chest and offers comforting words to both himself and the spirit to kind of help them be able to move through this experience together. The spirit starts helping Larry process his own traumatic memories that deal with homophobia and accept the effects that that had on who he is today, and even start healing a little bit. The way they process the various traumas they experienced are messy and loopy and non-linear, but the story still carries them with such compassion and humanity the whole time. He gets the same treatment that Rita and Cliff get. That, yes, they're these weird, unfortunate, gimmicky monster things, but really, they're not. They're just people, and they're dealing with the same stuff that most people deal with. They're overcoming hurts and mistakes and growing within this newfound family to be better people than they were before. Jane could have had that too. DID representation doesn't need to be clean and tidy and perfect. A character can be very early in their journey where they and other alters in their system are self-destructive. They can be shown having doubt and fear. They can be shown having relapses or being triggered by something that they thought that they had worked through. You can show how this early journey DID affects relationships and maybe makes it hard to maintain close friends. The messiness of a character is not what makes bad DID representation. It's the gimmickness, the treating the person with DID like some kind of gotcha game, like, oh, who's gonna come out now? What kind of surprise alter are we gonna get that's gonna throw a wrench into all of our plans? The other characters are characters. Jane is a sideshow. What we need is things that show that we have more in common with other people than we have differences. Yes, we have this very unique way of experiencing life, but we, just like you, are people. And season 1 Jane just doesn't get there for me. But what do you think? Is Jane good representation or not? Do you like her despite not thinking she's good representation? Do you dislike her despite thinking she is good representation? Let me know. I read every comment on every video. We love hearing what you have to think. Thank you everyone so much for watching. Thank you to all our patrons who help make this content possible, and an extra big thank you to Sarah Goley, Sarah Beers, and Will Mitchell. If you're interested in becoming a patron, a link to our Patreon is in the description below. We have tons of fun things like Patreon exclusive videos, suggesting and voting on topics for us to cover, and even a monthly Zoom call. And to each and every one of you, I hope you all remember that you are loved, you are valuable, and you are valid. See you next time. Bye!